I am Emily, 30 years old, and to the outside world, I am just a simple housewife and a food blogger with a modest following. But before I surrendered my identity to become the perfect wife, I was a forensic accountant for one of the top firms in New York City, specializing in uncovering corporate fraud and hidden assets. I spent 5 years living in Mexico City during my 20s, working with international charities, which is where I became fluent in Spanish. My husband and his family have no idea about that part of my life. They think I am just a sweet, naive American girl who got lucky. Tonight, that ignorance is going to cost them everything. Dinner felt normal, almost too normal. Smiles, crystal wine glasses clinking, and casual chatter drifting across the mahogany table. Then my mother-in-law Isabella locked eyes with my husband. They switched to Spanish, their voices lowering just enough to create an intimate circle that excluded me. They talked about me, about what they were going to do next. They were so sure I was clueless. They continued eating their steaks, laughing softly, completely unaware that I understood every single word. They never saw my next move coming. Before I continue this story, I want to know where you are watching from. Please comment below with your city and the time you are seeing this video. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to people who underestimated your intelligence. The air in the Castillo dining room was always cold, regardless of the season. It was a kind of chill that seeped into your bones, emanating not from the air conditioning, but from the people sitting around the table. I sat at my usual spot to the left of my husband Liam. Across from me sat his younger sister Sophia, who was currently scrolling through her phone, barely concealing her boredom. At the head of the table sat Isabella the matriarch, a woman who wore her disdain for me like a crown. She adjusted her diamond necklace, the stones glittering under the chandelier light, and offered me a tight, predatory smile. "Emily, dear," she began, her voice dripping with faux concern that barely masked her mockery. "I noticed you posted another one of those little casserole recipes today. Does that blog of yours actually generate any income, or is it still just a cute little hobby?" I forced myself to smile back, ignoring the stinging condescension. "It is growing, Isabella. I have a few new sponsors this month." Liam took a sip of his wine, not looking at me. He did not defend me. He never did anymore. In the beginning, he would have squeezed my hand or made a joke to lighten the mood. Now he just swirled the red liquid in his glass, staring into it as if the answers to his problems were drowning at the bottom. Isabella cut into her filet mignon with surgical precision. "Well, I suppose it keeps you busy. Since you seem to have so much trouble giving us a grandchild, you need something to fill your days." The comment hung in the air, toxic and heavy. I felt the familiar burn of tears in my eyes, but willed them away. I picked up the bottle of Cabernet to refill Isabella's glass, playing the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law. Just as I poured the wine, Isabella winked at Liam. It was a subtle motion, barely a flicker of an eyelid, but I saw it. Then she turned to Sophia and spoke in Spanish, her tone shifting from icy English to a rapid, fluid Castilian. "Look at her pouring wine like a waitress. It is the only thing she's good at." Sophia snorted, not even looking up from her phone, replying in Spanish. "She is pathetic, mother." I do not know how Liam stands it. I kept my hand steady. Not a single drop of wine spilled on the white tablecloth. I set the bottle down and picked up my fork, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. They thought I was deaf to their insults. They thought my silence was ignorance. I took a bite of my potatoes, chewing slowly, letting the flavors turn to ash in my mouth. My mind drifted back to 3 years ago. I was not this person. I was not this silent, nodding woman in pastel dresses. I was Emily, the rising star at a Manhattan firm. I met Liam at a gallery opening. He was charming, ambitious, and seemingly vulnerable. He told me about his family's wine importation business, how he wanted to modernize it, how he felt crushed by his mother's expectations. I fell for him, hard. I fell for the idea that we could build something together. When he asked me to marry him, he asked me to leave the city. He said he needed me in Connecticut. He needed a home. I gave up my promotion. I gave up my apartment. I gave up the career I had bled for. When I first moved into this world, I intended to tell them I spoke Spanish. I thought it would be a wonderful surprise, a way to bond with his heritage. But on my very first visit to this house before we were married, I overheard Isabella talking to her maid in the kitchen. She called me a gold digger. She said I looked cheap. She said Liam was just having fun with a white trash American. I stood in the hallway paralyzed. At that moment, I decided to keep my secret. I decided that information was power, and in this house, I was powerless. So I played the part. I asked Liam to teach me simple words like hello and thank you, stumbling over the pronunciation on purpose. I watched them smirk at my clumsy attempts. I let them believe they were superior. Over the years, that secret became my shield. I managed the household finances, but Liam never let me see the company accounts. He said it was too complicated for me. Little did he know, late at night while he slept, I had seen the bank notifications on his phone. I knew the business was bleeding money. I knew he was incompetent. 2 years ago, when the company faced a massive audit, I quietly used my own savings, the money I made from my stock portfolio that I never told him about, to patch a hole in his ledger. I routed it through an anonymous shell company so he would think it was a lucky break from an investor. I saved him. I saved this family's reputation because I loved him, because I thought we were a team. Back at the dinner table, the conversation in Spanish was intensifying. I focused on my breathing. In, out, in, out. Do not react. Do not cry. Listen. You are a forensic analyst. Gather the data. Isabella leaned in closer to Liam, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, though she remained in Spanish. Is it done? Did you get her signature on the tax documents? Liam nodded, finally looking up, a smirk playing on his lips. Yes, she signed everything this morning. She didn't even read it. She trusts me completely. It is pathetic, really. I froze. The documents. This morning, Liam had rushed into the kitchen with a stack of papers. He said they were routine tax filings for the house, something about joint filing status to save us money. I had been busy kneading dough for a recipe. I wiped my hands on my apron and signed where he pointed. I trusted him. I always trusted him. Isabella laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound. Perfect. By the time the lawyers file those next week, the transfer will be irreversible. The trust fund is solely in my name now. Every asset, the house, the cars, the savings accounts. It is all protected. And since the new debt is under her name, thanks to those loans you took out, she will be left with nothing but liability. My blood ran cold. The fork in my hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. They were not just insulting me. They were robbing me. They had tricked me into signing over my rights to our marital assets. And worse, they had pinned the company's debts onto me. I realized with horror that the investor money I had anonymously injected years ago was probably gone squandered, and now they were setting me up to take the fall for whatever financial mess Liam had created since then. Sophia chimed in, waving her fork for emphasis. But what about the prenup? Can't she contest it, Sarit? Liam shook his head, taking a large bite of steak. No, we have that covered. Mother has been planting the seeds with the family doctor for months. We are going to paint her as unstable. The stress of infertility, the obsession with her blog. We will say she's having a breakdown. If she tries to fight us for alimony, we will threaten to have her committed. She will walk away with nothing just to keep her freedom. I felt bile rise in my throat, the gaslighting, the sudden concern Isabella had shown last month when she suggested I see her friend, Dr. Alvarez, for my nerves. It was all a setup. They were building a paper trail to declare me mentally incompetent. Isabella raised her glass. To the future. A future where we are finally rid of this dead weight. And to your new beginning, Liam. When is she arriving? Liam smiled, a genuine smile that I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Next week. Once Emily is kicked out, Elena can move in. She's already pregnant. It is a boy mother, a true heir. The world stopped. The buzzing in my ears was deafening. Elena, pregnant, a boy. I stared at the man I had shared a bed with for 3 years. The man I had sacrificed my career for. He wasn't just a failed businessman or a mama's boy. He was a monster. He had another woman. He had a child on the way, and he was planning to discard me like a used napkin, leaving me bankrupt, broken and labeled insane. I looked down at my plate. The steak looked raw and bloody. I gripped the steak knife, my knuckles turning white. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage washed over me, hot and violent. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to stab the knife into the wood and scream at them in perfect fluent Spanish that I knew everything. But I didn't. The old Emily, the wife who loved Liam, died in that chair. the forensic accountant, the woman who could track a hidden dollar through a dozen shell corporations, woke up. I took a deep breath. I forced the muscles in my face to relax. I looked up at Isabella, then at Liam, and finally at Sophia. I offered them the sweetest, most innocent smile of my life. I am so glad everyone is in such a good mood tonight, I said in English, my voice steady and light. It makes me so happy to see you all smiling. Liam looked at me, his eyes full of pity and contempt. He replied in English, "You are a good wife, Emily. Always so supportive." Then he switched back to Spanish, muttering, "Enjoy it while you can, you stupid cow." I cut another piece of meat. I chewed. I swallowed. Inside my mind, I was already making a list. I needed access to the safe. I needed to clone Liam's phone. I needed to call James, my old boss at the firm. I wasn't going to leave with nothing. I was going to take them apart brick by brick. They wanted a war. They had no idea they had just declared war on a nuclear power. Dinner continued. I ate every bite. I even ordered dessert because I needed my strength. The game had just begun and I had the ultimate advantage. I knew their playbook and they didn't even know I was on the field. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The pounding in my head wasn't a lie anymore. It was a physical manifestation of the knife twisting in my back. I pressed my fingers to my temples, feigning a sudden migraine. The wine, I think. It has gone straight to my head. I need to lie down for a moment. Isabella waved her hand dismissively, not even bothering to look up from her plate. "Go on then. Don't let us keep you. We have important matters to discuss anyway. Matters that don't concern you." I stood up, my legs feeling like lead weights. Every step away from that dining table felt like walking through deep water. I could feel their eyes on my back burning with contempt. I could hear the murmur of Spanish resuming before I even reached the doorway. They couldn't wait for me to leave, so they could continue plotting my destruction. I kept my posture straight, my pace steady, until I turned the corner into the hallway. Then I ran. I scrambled up the grand staircase, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't go to our bedroom. I couldn't bear to look at the bed we shared, the photos on the nightstand, the lies framed in silver and gold. I went to the guest bathroom at the end of the hall, the one with the heavy oak door and the thick marble walls. I threw myself inside and locked the door. The click of the lock was the loudest sound in the world. I collapsed onto the cold tile floor, pulling my knees to my chest. The facade crumbled. The perfect smiling wife disintegrated, leaving behind a raw, trembling mess. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream that was tearing at my throat. Tears, hot and scalding, poured down my face, ruining the makeup I had applied so carefully just hours before. How could he? The question looped in my mind like a broken record. I loved him. I gave him everything. I left my life in New York. I left my friends. I emptied my secret savings account to save his failing company, and I did it anonymously so his fragile ego wouldn't be bruised. And this was my repayment, to be mocked in a language they thought I didn't understand, to be discarded for a cousin, to be framed as insane. I remembered the way he touched my shoulder yesterday, telling me he loved me. It was a lie. I remembered the way Isabella smiled when I gave her that scarf for her birthday. It was a lie. I remembered Sophia asking for advice on her college applications. It was all a lie. I was never a member of this family. I was a host organism, and they were the parasites, feeding on my kindness, my money, and my patience until there was nothing left to take. I retched dryly into the toilet, my body rejecting the physical reality of their betrayal. The nausea was overwhelming. I felt stupid. That was the worst part. Not just sad, but incredibly profound stupid. How could I, a woman who used to hunt down international fraudsters for a living, miss the con artist sleeping in my own bed? I sat there for what felt like hours, shivering on the bathroom rug. But slowly, the tears stopped. The heat in my chest began to cool, replaced by something harder, something sharper. I pulled myself up and walked to the vanity. I gripped the edges of the sink, my knuckles turning white, and stared into the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked wrecked. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her hair was messy. She looked like a victim. She looked exactly like the weak, pathetic American girl Isabella said she was. "No," I whispered. I turned on the faucet, letting the water run ice cold. I splashed it onto my face, scrubbing away the tears, the snot and the pity. I grabbed a plush towel and dried my skin with rough, deliberate motions. When I looked back at the mirror, the victim was gone. Emily, the housewife, died tonight on that bathroom floor. The eyes staring back at me now were cold, calculating, dead calm. They were the eyes of the senior risk analyst who had once brought down a Ponzi scheme worth $40 million. They were the eyes of a woman who knew how to find a needle in a haystack and then used that needle to stitch the culprit's mouth shut. I straightened my spine. I smoothed my dress. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lavender soap and betrayal. It was time to go to work. My brain, which had been clouded by domesticity and romance for 3 years, suddenly snapped back into its factory settings. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was auditing. I wasn't a wife. I was an investigator. And this house was no longer my home. It was a crime scene. I began to catalog the data. I closed my eyes and let the memories of the last 6 months replay. But this time I viewed them through the lens of a forensic accountant. The red flags were everywhere. I had just been too in love to see them. Flag number 1. 3 months ago. Liam came home late smelling of cigars and anxiety. He had a stack of documents in a blue folder. He told me they were for a refinancing application on the beach house. He said, "Babe, I need you to sign these. The notary is coming in 10 minutes. I tried to read them, but he kissed my neck, distracting me. He said, "It's just standard bank jargon. Trust me." I signed. My mind raced, reconstructing the pages I had glimpsed. The header hadn't said refinance application. It had said liability assumption agreement. I had thought it was a fancy term for the mortgage. Now I knew. I had voluntarily assumed a debt for a shell company. Which shell company I needed to find out. Flag number 2, the business trips. Last month, Liam went to Miami for a wine expo. He was gone for 4 days. When he came back, he didn't have any brochures, any samples, or any new client lists. He had a tan line on his ring finger where he had taken his wedding band off. At the time, I told myself he probably just went to the beach and didn't want to lose the ring in the ocean. God, I was naive. He wasn't at a wine expo. He was likely with Elena. Miami is the gateway to Latin America. Was she there, or did he go to meet her family? Flag number 3, the mail. About 6 weeks ago, I saw a letter from a bank in the Cayman Islands addressed to Isabella. I brought it inside, and Liam snatched it from my hand, his face pale. He said Mother hates it when you touch her mail. Why would Isabella, a woman who barely understands online banking, have an account in the Caymans? That was the trust fund. That was where our money was going. And the biggest flag of all, the isolation. Slowly over the last year, Liam had cut me off from my friends. He said they were bad influences. He said they were jealous of our wealth. He encouraged me to stop consulting for my old firm remotely. He wanted me dependent. He wanted me alone. It wasn't protection. It was containment. I opened the medicine cabinet and splashed more cold water on my wrists. My pulse was steady now, a slow, rhythmic thrum. The plan was forming in my head, intricate and ruthless. They think they have won, I whispered to the mirror. They think the game is over because they captured the queen. But they forgot one thing. I am not just a piece on the board. I am the one who wrote the rules. I needed evidence, hard, undeniable evidence. The conversation I overheard was inadmissible hearsay. I needed documents. I needed recordings. I needed the digital footprint of their theft. I thought about the safe in Liam's study. It was a vintage biometric model, but it also had a keypad backup. He changed the code every few months, usually based on things he loved. When we first got married, the code was my birthday. Last year, it was the date he bought his Porsche. What was it now? Probably the due date of his bastard child, or maybe his mother's birthday. I would crack it. I had cracked harder systems than a suburban husband's vanity safe. I thought about his phone. He never let it out of his sight, but he slept like the dead after drinking red wine. Tonight, he had finished half a bottle. I would have a window of opportunity between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. I needed to clone his SIM card or at least export his WhatsApp chat history. The Spanish conversations with his mother and sister would be there. And Isabella, the matriarch, she was the architect of this. She was the one who pulled the strings. But arrogance was her weakness. She didn't update her technology. She used that old iPad I gave her for recipes and telenovelas. She never logged out of anything. If her email was logged in on that tablet, I had the keys to the kingdom. I looked at myself one last time. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, simmering fury. I wasn't going to just divorce Liam. I was going to dismantle him. I was going to strip them of their assets, their reputation, and their freedom. I would take back every cent I invested with interest. I unlocked the bathroom door. The hallway was quiet. Downstairs, I could hear the faint clinking of dessert spoons and the low rumble of their laughter. They were celebrating my demise. Let them laugh. Let them enjoy their flan and their victory champagne. I stepped out into the hall, moving silently on the plush carpet. I wasn't going back to the bedroom to cry. I was going to the kitchen to make tea, to play the part of the recovering wife. I would apologize for my headache. I would smile. I would be the perfect stupid American girl for one more night. Because tomorrow, the audit begins. The morning sun filtered through the silk drapes of our master bedroom, casting long golden bars across the floor that looked less like light and more like the bars of a cage. I lay still for a moment, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the man sleeping beside me. Liam looked peaceful, almost innocent, his arm thrown carelessly over his eyes. It was terrifying how effectively a human face could mask a monster. Yesterday, looking at him would have filled me with a warm, grounding sense of safety. Today, it felt like waking up next to a stranger holding a knife. I slipped out of bed, my feet silent on the plush carpet. My movements were automatic, programmed by 3 years of domestic routine, but my mind was operating on a different frequency entirely. I was no longer Emily the wife. I was Emily the operative. I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, and applied my armor. A touch of concealer to hide the sleeplessness, a swipe of pink lipstick to project happiness, and a floral dress that screamed harmless suburbanite. I practiced my smile in the mirror. It didn't reach my eyes, but it didn't have to. Liam never looked at my eyes anymore. Downstairs, the kitchen was cold and quiet. I started the coffee maker, the gurgling sound echoing in the silence. I whisked eggs, fried bacon, and sliced fruit. The smell of grease and roasted beans filled the air, the scent of a happy home. When Liam finally shuffled down, scratching his chest, I set a plate in front of him with a flourish. "Good morning, darling," I said, my voice bright and chirpy. "How did you sleep?" He grunted, taking a sip of coffee. "Fine. Headache gone. Completely." I lied smoothly. "Just needed some rest. I was thinking of making a pot roast tonight." "Your mother loves my pot roast." Liam checked his phone, a dismissive smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Sure. Whatever. I might be late." Meetings. I knew meetings meant plotting with his mother or whispering sweet nothings to Elena, but I just nodded. "That is fine. I will have it ready whenever you get home." He ate quickly and left to shower. The moment I heard the water running upstairs, I moved. My target was sitting on the coffee table in the sunroom, Isabella's iPad. It was an older model I had given her 2 years ago for Christmas. She used it exclusively for watching her dramatic telenovelas and scrolling through Architectural Digest, completely oblivious to how the technology actually worked. To her, it was a magic glass screen. To me, it was a Trojan horse. I picked it up. The screen was smeared with fingerprints. I unlocked it easily. The passcode was 1234. Isabella had zero concept of cybersecurity. My heart rate remained steady, a calm 60 beats per minute, as I navigated to the settings. I had set this device up for her, and because she found creating accounts tedious, I had simply logged her into a sub-account of my own iCloud family sharing plan, which she had never bothered to change. I checked the synchronization settings. Everything was still linked: photos, notes, and most importantly, voice memos. But that wasn't enough. I needed active surveillance. I quickly downloaded a high-end dictation app disguised as a system utility file. It was designed for recording lectures capable of running in the background, even when the screen was off, capturing audio in high fidelity. I set the permissions to allow microphone access at all times and hid the icon deep inside a folder labeled System Updates that I knew she would never touch. Just as I finished, I heard Isabella's heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I quickly wiped the screen with the hem of my apron and set it back down, turning to fluff a pillow just as she entered. "Good morning, Isabella," I said, bowing my head slightly. She looked at me with that familiar mix of boredom and distaste. "The coffee smells burnt," she muttered, picking up the iPad. She unlocked it and tapped on her soap opera app. She had no idea that the device in her hand was now a live microphone, broadcasting every snide comment and secret conversation directly to a cloud server I could access from anywhere. I spent the rest of the morning running errands, or so I told them. I drove my modest sedan into the city, but I didn't go to the grocery store. I went to a specialty electronics shop tucked away in an industrial park, a place I hadn't visited since my forensic accounting days. The clerk, a man with thick glasses and a suspicious nature, didn't ask questions when I requested their smallest voice-activated listening devices. I bought 3. They were expensive, black, and no larger than a quarter, with a battery life of 72 hours. Driving back to the Hamptons, I felt a strange rush of adrenaline. It wasn't fear, it was competence. I was back in my element. When I returned to the estate, the house was empty, Liam was at the office, and Isabella was out at her country club luncheon. This was my window. I started with the living room. This was their war room, the place where they sat with glasses of sherry and switched to Spanish to discuss their finances and my destruction. I walked over to the large antique Ming vase that stood on a pedestal near the fireplace. It was Isabella's pride and joy. I reached inside my hand, brushing against the dry dust of the interior, and adhered the first tiny black device to the inner rim just out of sight. It was perfectly positioned to capture audio from the sofas and the armchairs. Next, I moved to the garage. Liam's Porsche 911 was parked there, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. It was his sanctuary, the place where he made his private calls. I knew he kept a spare key in the tool cabinet because he was constantly losing his primary set. I found it and unlocked the car. The smell of his cologne and another scent, something floral and cheap. Likely Elena's perfume hit me. I suppressed the urge to vomit and focused on the task. I slid into the passenger seat. I needed a spot that was central but invisible. I reached up to the overhead console where the map lights were housed. With a small flathead screwdriver I had brought from the kitchen, I gently popped the plastic cover loose. There was just enough space between the wiring to wedge the second recorder. I secured it with a strip of black electrical tape, snapped the cover back on, and wiped down the console to remove my fingerprints. I sat there for a moment in the silence of the garage. I was surrounded by the symbols of their wealth, the cars, the house, the artwork, all purchased with money. They were hiding money, they were stealing, and likely money I had unknowingly provided. I stepped out of the car and locked it. As I walked back into the house, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the cloud. A new audio file had been uploaded from Isabella's iPad. I went into the pantry, closing the door behind me, and popped in my earbuds. I pressed play. The audio was crisp. I heard the sound of silverware on china, the background noise of a restaurant, and then Isabella's voice, loud and clear. "She is so stupid," Isabella was saying, presumably to her friends at the country club. "She actually thinks she's part of the family. I give it one more week before we throw her out on the street." I listened to her laugh. It was an ugly, harsh sound. I didn't cry this time. I didn't tremble. I just stood in the dark pantry surrounded by jars of pasta sauce and bags of rice and smiled. A cold, terrifying smile. "Let them talk," I whispered to the darkness. "Every word they say is another nail in their coffin, and I am the one holding the hammer." For the next 7 days, my life became a split-screen reality. On the surface, I was the devoted wife and dutiful daughter-in-law. I cooked elaborate dinners, I smiled when Isabella critiqued my flower arrangements, and I kissed Liam goodbye every morning before he left for the office. But underneath that perfectly polished exterior, I was living in a dark subterranean world of secrets and audio files. My earbuds became an extension of my body. I wore them while I gardened, hiding them under my hair. I wore them while I grocery shopped. I wore them while I sat in the bath. To the world, I was listening to music or podcasts. In reality, I was listening to the people I loved plotting my destruction. The sheer volume of hatred was staggering. I had expected them to talk about money. I had expected them to discuss the legal loopholes of the prenup. I was prepared for greed. I was not prepared for the visceral personal cruelty. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the true nature of Liam's betrayal finally clicked into place. I was in the laundry room folding Liam's shirts, pressing the warm iron against the crisp white cotton, when a new file uploaded from the device I had planted in his Porsche. The timestamp indicated it was recorded during his lunch break. I heard the familiar hum of the engine, followed by the sound of a car door opening and closing. Then a woman's voice filled my ears. It wasn't his mother. It was younger, sultry, and speaking Spanish with a speed and intimacy that made my stomach turn. Hola, mi amor, she said. I recognized the voice immediately. It was Elena. Elena was the woman Liam had introduced to me 6 months ago. He had brought her to dinner, presenting her as his distant cousin from Madrid, who had just moved to the States to work as his executive assistant. I remembered that dinner vividly. I had welcomed her. I had cooked her a traditional paella, trying to make her feel at home. I had even given her a list of good doctors and hair salons in the area. I remembered how she had looked at me across the table that night, her dark eyes wide and innocent, thanking me for my hospitality. Now, through the headphones, I heard the sound of kissing, wet, sloppy, passionate sounds that went on for an agonizingly long time. I stopped ironing. The steam hissed up into my face, but I didn't feel the heat. I only felt the cold chill spreading through my veins. I missed you, Liam whispered in Spanish. The old witch at home is driving me crazy. She is so needy, always asking me about my day, always trying to be the perfect wife. It is exhausting pretending to care. Elena laughed a low, throaty sound that was a world away from the shy giggle she had used at my dinner table. Be patient, baby. Just a few more days. Once the anniversary party is over, we will be free. Did she suspect anything about the apartment? No, Liam replied. She thinks the withdrawals are for business vendors. She has no idea I bought the penthouse for us. She is clueless, Elena. She lives in a bubble of flour and sugar. I sank onto the tile floor of the laundry room, clutching the ironing board for support. My knees gave out. A penthouse. He had bought a penthouse with our money. While I was clipping coupons and shopping at discount markets to save for the business, he was buying luxury real estate for his mistress. But the worst was yet to come. Isabella called me today. Elena said, her voice turning serious. She wants to know if we are bringing Mateo to the party. Mateo? Who was Mateo? Liam sighed. We can't bring him yet. It is too risky. If Emily sees him, she might figure it out. The kid looks exactly like me. My heart stopped. Literally stopped. I couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt suddenly thin, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out. Kid looks exactly like me. I rewound the audio. I listened again and again. I pressed play on the next file, recorded an hour later. It was a video call between Liam and his mother. I could only hear Liam's side and the faint, tinny sound of Isabella's voice through the car speakers, but it was enough. He is walking mother, Liam was saying, his voice bursting with a pride I had never heard him direct at me. He took 3 steps today. He is strong. A true Castillo. Isabella's voice crackled through. Finally, a grandson, a male heir to carry on the name, unlike that barren mule you married. Does she know? Of course not. Liam scoffed. She thinks I am sterile. Remember, we paid Dr. Alvarez to falsify my sperm count results last year. She thinks the problem is her. She hates herself for it. It keeps her weak. It keeps her docile. I ripped the earbuds out of my ears and threw them across the room. I curled into a ball on the floor, a guttural scream trapped in my chest. The infertility. The endless months of temperature, charting the hormone injections that made me sick and bloated, the tears I cried every month when the test was negative. I had blamed myself. I had hated my own body. I had apologized to him for not being able to give him a family. And it was all a lie. He wasn't sterile. He had a son with his cousin, a son named Mateo, who was learning to walk while I was learning to live with the shame of being broken. They had gaslit me into hating my own biology. They had watched me suffer, watched me inject myself with unnecessary drugs, and laughed about it behind my back. I lay there for a long time staring at the ceiling. The pain was different now. It wasn't the sharp stab of betrayal anymore. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket of realization. I wasn't just a wife they didn't love. I was a target. I was a stepping stone. I was a resource to be mined and then discarded. I retrieved the earbuds. I had to keep listening. I needed to know everything. Over the next few days, the picture became clearer and uglier. I learned that Elena wasn't a cousin at all. She was the daughter of their business partner in Spain. This was an arranged match, a merging of 2 powerful families, and I was just the placeholder who had kept Liam's bed warm and his bank accounts full until the timing was right. They had a name for me. I heard it in almost every conversation. La Gringa Estúpida, the stupid American girl. Did the Gringa sign the papers? Isabella asked in one recording from the living room vase. Yes, she signed, Sophia answered. She was so happy to help. God, it is embarrassing how desperate she is for approval. She actually thinks if she works hard enough, we will accept her. She is like a stray dog that keeps coming back no matter how many times you kick it. Liam laughed in the background. Don't worry, we are kicking the dog out for good next week. That was the final piece of the puzzle. The timeline. Through a series of phone calls between Isabella and her lawyer, I learned their exact plan. The anniversary party next Saturday wasn't a celebration of our marriage. It was my public execution. They planned to let me host the party. They wanted me to spend my own money catering it, decorating it, and inviting all of our high society friends. They wanted me to stand on stage and give a speech about how much I loved Liam. And then once the guests were drunk and the atmosphere was high, Liam was going to serve me with divorce papers in front of everyone. But not just divorce papers. They had hired a private investigator to doctor photos of me with a man I had never met. They were going to accuse me of infidelity. They were going to frame me as the cheater, the liar, the mentally unstable woman who drove her poor husband into the arms of another. They wanted to humiliate me so thoroughly that no one in town would ever believe a word I said. They wanted to destroy my credibility so that when I claimed fraud, everyone would just see a crazy ex-wife ranting. After the party, security would escort me off the premises. I would have no car as the lease was in the company name. I would have no money as the accounts were drained. I would have nowhere to go. And the very next day, Elena and baby Matteo would move into the master bedroom. I sat at my kitchen island, sipping a cup of cold tea. The house was silent. The recordings had stopped for the night. I looked around at the life I had built, the curtains I had sewn, the paintings I had chosen, the life that was about to be erased. They called me La Gringa Estúpida. They thought I was a stray dog. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn where the party tent would be erected in 3 days. You are right about one thing, Liam, I whispered to the empty room. I was stupid. I was stupid to love you. I was stupid to trust you. But you are making a fatal error in your calculations. You think you are kicking a stray dog, but you are actually locking yourself in a cage with a wolf. I went to my laptop. I opened a new secure browser. I logged into the encrypted server where I used to store my work files. I cracked my knuckles. The tears were gone. The heartbreak was packed away in a box labeled later. Right now I had a party to plan, and I needed to make sure the entertainment was absolutely killer. If they wanted a show, I would give them a show, but the script was going to change. The Gringa was about to speak, and when she did, she wouldn't just be speaking Spanish. She would be speaking the language of total, scorched earth ruin. I pulled my car into the desolate corner of a Walmart parking lot at 10 in the evening. The neon lights buzzed overhead, casting long flickering shadows across the dashboard. I couldn't make this call from the house. I couldn't risk the Wi-Fi logs or the chance that Liam might walk in on me. I took a deep breath, staring at the phone in my hand. It had been 3 years since I spoke to James Sterling. When I left the firm, he told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. He told me that a brain like mine wasn't meant to worry about dinner parties and dry cleaning. I had told him he was just bitter. Now I was about to tell him he was right. I dialed the number. I didn't need to look it up. I had memorized it years ago. It rang twice. Sterling, a voice answered, low, gravelly, and sharp as a razor. It was the voice of a man who moved millions of dollars with a single signature and hunted financial criminals for sport. James I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. It is Emily. There was a pause on the other end. A long, heavy silence. I braced myself for the I told you so, or the click of the line going dead. Instead, he simply said, you are calling me on a burner line at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. This isn't a social call, Emily. Who is the target? I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That was James. No small talk, no pity, just business. My husband, I replied, and his entire family. I need you to open a secure channel, James. I have data, a lot of it. 30 seconds later, I was uploading the encrypted files I had scraped from the family cloud and the initial audio recordings. I sat there in the dark, watching the progress bar load, feeling the weight of my double life. I was no longer just a wife scorned. I was a whistleblower. Give me an hour, James said. Go get a coffee. And Emily, welcome back. I waited. The coffee from the thermos I brought tasted bitter, but it kept me sharp. When the phone rang again, James didn't waste time on pleasantries. You were right to call me, he said, and I could hear the sound of typing in the background. I have run a preliminary trace on the accounts you flagged. The Castillos aren't just bad with money, Emily. They are criminals. My stomach dropped. I knew they were greedy, but criminal. Explain, I said, grabbing a pen and a notepad from the glove compartment. James continued, his voice picking up speed, the excitement of the hunt creeping in. You see these transfers to the Cayman Trust Fund, the ones they were bragging about at dinner. They are clumsy. They are structuring the deposits just below the $10,000 reporting threshold to avoid IRS flags. That is a federal crime right there. But it gets worse. I looked into their import records. Their company, Castillo Imports, claims to be bringing in high-end vintage wines from Spain. But the shipping manifests don't match the weight distribution. What does that mean? I asked, my mind racing. It means they are moving ghost inventory, James said grimly. They are invoicing for expensive wine, but they are shipping cheap vinegar or empty crates and then using the sales to launder money for someone else. Probably a cartel or a shadow investor in Mexico. The money Liam is hiding from you isn't just profits. It is dirty money. That is why they are so desperate to cut you out and get you to sign those liability waivers. They want to pin the tail on the donkey. If the feds raid them, the paper trail for the debts and the fraudulent loans leads directly to you. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. It was more diabolical than I had imagined. They weren't just stealing my savings. They were setting me up to take the fall for a massive money laundering operation. Liam was going to send me to federal prison while he lived in a penthouse with his mistress. James, can we prove it? I asked. Can we nail them? We can, James replied. But we have a problem. The chain of evidence is broken at the top. I can see the money moving, but I can't prove Isabella is the architect. She is smart enough to keep her name off the digital ledgers. Everything is authorized through shell companies. We need the keystone. What do you need? I asked. I need her digital signature, James said. And I need the physical ledger. You mentioned a black book in the audio recordings, the one they keep in the safe. That book will have the real numbers, the names of their laundering partners. Without that, they can claim it was incompetence or employee error. With that book, they go away for 20 years. I closed my eyes, visualizing the heavy steel safe in the library. And the digital signature, it is on a secure USB key she keeps, James explained. Or it is a biometric encryption on her primary computer. If you can get me access to her private terminal and get those physical files, I can build a RICO case that will bury them so deep they will need a map to find sunlight. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I had to become a thief. I had to break into the most secure room in the house under the nose of a woman who watched me like a hawk and steal the evidence that would destroy her. I can do it, I said. Emily, James warned, his voice softening slightly. This is dangerous. If they catch you, they won't just divorce you. People who launder this kind of money, they make problems disappear. I thought about Liam's laugh when he talked about kicking me out. I thought about the baby name they had chosen. I thought about the wasted years. Let them try, I said. They think I am a stupid American girl. They think I am weak. I am going to walk into their den, James. I am going to smile in their faces. And I am going to take everything. Good, James said. I am sending you a piece of software. It is a keylogger and a mirror drive. You need to get it onto Isabella's desktop computer, not the iPad, the main terminal in the library. Once you plug it in, I need 10 minutes of uninterrupted connection. Can you give me 10 minutes? I can give you 20, I said. We hung up. I sat in the car for a few more minutes, letting the magnitude of the situation sink in. I wasn't just fighting for a divorce settlement anymore. I was fighting for my freedom and my life. The alliance was formed. James was the sword, but I was the hand that had to wield it. I started the car and drove back toward the Hamptons. The house loomed in the distance, dark and imposing against the night sky. It looked like a fortress, but every fortress has a weakness. For the Castillo estate, that weakness was arrogance. They were so busy looking down on me that they forgot to look behind them. I pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and walked to the front door. I was walking into the lion's den, but for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't the prey. I was the hunter. I unlocked the door and stepped into the silent hallway. The air smelled of expensive lilies and old secrets. I glanced toward the library door. The heavy oak was shut tight. Behind it lay the safe, the computer, and the answers to everything. I needed a plan to get Isabella out of the house or distracted long enough to work. A plan began to form. A risky, dangerous plan involving the one thing Isabella loved more than her money, her vanity. I would use her ego against her. I would offer to help her with the very thing she was using to destroy me. I climbed the stairs to the guest room where I had been sleeping since my migraines started. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of war drums. Tomorrow, the infiltration would begin. I had the tools, I had the partner, and I had the motivation of a woman who had nothing left to lose. The Castillos wanted a tragedy. Fine, I would write them a tragedy, but in my version, the villain doesn't get away. The next morning, I put on my best performance yet. I chose a pale yellow dress, the kind that made me look washed out and harmless, and pulled my hair back into a loose, messy bun. I wanted to look like I was trying too hard. I wanted to look desperate. I walked into the sunroom where Isabella was having her morning espresso. She was tapping away on her phone, likely communicating with the wedding planner about the real party she was organizing for Liam and Elena later in the year. "Mother," I said, my voice trembling slightly with feigned nervousness. "I have been thinking." Isabella didn't look up. "Thinking is dangerous for you, dear. You should try to avoid it." I swallowed my pride, forcing a weak smile. "I know I haven't been the perfect daughter-in-law. I know I have disappointed you with the baby situation, but I want to make it up to you. For the anniversary party next Saturday, I want to handle everything. I want to pay for it out of my own savings. I want to make it a tribute to the Castillo family legacy. I want to show everyone how proud I am to be a part of this family." Isabella finally looked up. Her eyes narrowed, scanning my face for any sign of deception. But all she saw was a pathetic, eager-to-please woman begging for a scrap of affection. I saw the gears turning in her head. If I paid for the party, she saved money. If I organized it, she didn't have to lift a finger. And most importantly, if I made a big emotional speech about family and legacy right before Liam served me with divorce papers, the humiliation would be absolute. It would be the perfect dramatic climax she craved. She smiled, a slow reptilian curling of her lips. "That is a lovely idea, Emily. A grand party. All of our friends. The investors? Yes. I think that would be appropriate." I let out a sigh of relief, clapping my hands together like a giddy schoolgirl. "Oh, thank you, Mother. I promise I won't let you down. And there is one more thing." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "I know Liam is stressed about the tax audit coming up. I heard him on the phone. I have a background in, well, just basic bookkeeping from my old job, but I am very organized. I was wondering if I could help sort through the receipts. I know the accountant is expensive. If I could just organize the files for him, maybe it would save the company some money. I just want to be useful." Isabella laughed. It was a sharp barking sound. "You help with the company finances." "Emily, darling, these are complex international trade documents. They are not grocery lists for your little cooking blog. And besides, most of our internal records are in Spanish. You wouldn't understand a single word." I looked down at my feet, playing the part of the dejected child. "I know. I bought a Spanish dictionary. I thought maybe I could try to learn Please Isabella. Let me prove I can be more than just a housewife. Let me feel like I am contributing to the empire you built." The flattery hit its mark. Isabella's ego was a massive, hungry beast, and I had just fed it a prime steak. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and amusement. She saw a woman so desperate to belong that she was willing to do the grunt work that no one else wanted to do. Isabella hated paperwork. Her desk in the library was a disaster zone of unopened envelopes and loose ledgers. The idea of having me her servant clean up her mess while she went to the spa was too tempting to resist. "Fine," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "If you want to waste your time, go ahead. The overflow files are in the cardboard box in the corner of the library. It is mostly old invoices and shipping manifests from the last quarter. Just try not to ruin anything with your incompetence. And don't expect Liam to thank you. He hates it when women meddle in business." I beamed at her. "Thank you, Isabella. I will get started tonight." That evening, the house was quiet. Liam was working late, which I knew meant he was at the penthouse with Elena. Isabella had retired to her room with a bottle of wine. I walked into the library, my heart pounding a steady rhythm against my ribs. I wasn't nervous about getting caught. I was nervous about what I was about to find. I approached the cardboard box in the corner. It looked innocuous, just a heap of papers gathering dust. But as any forensic accountant knows, the truth isn't usually in the locked safe. It is in the trash. It is in the papers people think are too boring to shred. I picked up the heavy box and carried it to the large oak desk. I turned on the Gringa banker's lamp, creating a pool of light in the dark room. I pulled out my phone and set it to scan mode, ready to digitize everything. Then I reached into the box. Isabella was right about one thing. Everything was in Spanish. But she was wrong about me not understanding it. To me, these papers were singing. They were telling a story, and it was a story of massive systemic fraud. I started sorting. The first layer was mundane invoices for bottles, corks, shipping containers. But as I dug deeper, I found the anomalies. I found a series of invoices from a company called Soluciones Logísticas, based in Juarez, Mexico. They were billing Castillo imports for consulting services and market research. The amounts were staggering. $50,000 here, $80,000 there. I laughed softly to myself. Consulting services. It was the oldest trick in the book. You can't ship drugs or illegal cash directly, so you pay a fake company for a service that never happened. But the real goldmine was at the bottom of the box. It was a bound leather notebook slightly battered with the initials LC embossed on the front. Liam Castillo. It was his handwriting inside. I opened it. My breath hitched. This was it, the Holy Grail. It was a manual ledger, a double set of books. On the left side of the page, he had written the official numbers, the ones they showed the IRS. These numbers showed the business breaking even or taking a slight loss to avoid taxes. On the right side in red ink were the real numbers. The profit margins were insane. 400% markup on vintage wine that cost pennies to produce. But it got worse. I turned the pages, my eyes scanning the Spanish notations. Liam was sloppy. He had written notes in the margins. Payment to El Jefe, delayed. Structuring deposit for Isabella's trust, split into 4 transactions. Bribe for customs officer at Port of Newark, paid in cash. He had documented everything, every crime, every bribe, every dollar stolen from the government and hidden from me. He had written it all down in Spanish because he was so arrogant, so sure that his American wife was too stupid to decipher it. He thought this language was a secret code that kept him safe. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just white-collar crime. El Jefe. That wasn't a banker. That was a cartel connection. My husband wasn't just a money launderer. He was working for dangerous people. The realization made me nauseous, but it also solidified my resolve. I wasn't just divorcing a cheater, I was escaping a criminal enterprise. I worked through the night. My hands flew snapping high-resolution photos of every page in the ledger. I used a scanning app that automatically uploaded the files to the encrypted server James had set up. I categorized them: tax evasion, money laundering, bribery, RICO predicates. As I worked, I found the document that sealed Isabella's fate. It was a handwritten letter from her to Liam, tucked between the pages of the ledger. It was in Spanish, of course. Liam, make sure the transfers to the Cayman account are completed before the anniversary. Once we get rid of Emily, I want to liquidate the US assets and move everything offshore. We cannot risk the audit finding the discrepancies. Use her signature on the loan documents as the scapegoat. If the feds come, she is the CEO of the shell company. She goes to jail, not us. I stared at the paper. The handwriting was elegant, loopy, and aristocratic. It was a signed confession. She had explicitly instructed him to frame me. She had orchestrated the entire setup. I carefully photographed the letter, making sure the lighting was perfect. I captured the unique texture of the paper, the specific shade of ink. This image alone was enough to put Isabella away for life. By 4 a.m., I was done. I had copied over 300 pages of incriminating evidence. I had the digital map of their entire criminal empire. I carefully reorganized the box. I put the boring invoices back on top, bearing the black ledger and the incriminating letter at the bottom, exactly where I had found them. I dusted off the desk, wiping away my fingerprints. I turned off the lamp. I picked up the box and carried it back to the corner. I stood there for a moment in the darkness, looking at the silent library. It looked the same as it had when I entered. The rows of leather-bound books, the expensive Persian rug, the portrait of Liam's grandfather hanging over the mantelpiece. It reeked of old money and prestige. But now I knew the truth. It was all a facade. The foundation of this house was rotting. It was built on lies, theft, and the exploitation of everyone they considered beneath them. I walked back upstairs to my room. My body was exhausted, but my mind was electric. I felt a strange sense of peace. For weeks I had been drowning in their cruelty. I had felt small, helpless, and used. But tonight, in the quiet of that library, the balance of power had shifted. I crawled into bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin. I checked my phone one last time. James had sent a single text message. Received. It is a slaughter, Emily. Get some sleep. We win. I closed my eyes. I didn't dream of Liam or the baby he was having with Elena. I didn't dream of Isabella's sneer. I dreamed of a courtroom. I dreamed of the look on their faces when the prosecutor projected that handwritten letter onto the screen. I dreamed of the sound of a gavel coming down sharp and final, shattering their world into a million pieces. The trap was set. The bait was taken. The anniversary party was in 3 days. They thought they were walking into a celebration of their victory. They had no idea they were walking directly into the kill zone. And I, the stupid American girl, the gringa who couldn't speak Spanish, would be the one to close the door behind them. I told Liam I was going to the city to pick up a custom dress for the anniversary party. He didn't even look up from his phone when he waved me off, muttering something about checking the credit card limit. He had no idea that the credit card I was using today didn't belong to him. It belonged to the Emily he thought no longer existed. It was linked to a high-yield savings account I had maintained under my maiden name, a safety net I had started the day I overheard Isabella call me trash, 3 years ago. Today, that safety net was about to turn into a war chest. I drove past the boutique district and headed straight for Midtown Manhattan. I parked in a garage beneath a glass and steel skyscraper that scraped the gray sky. My destination was the 45th floor, the offices of Vance and Sterling. Yes, Sterling, as in James, my old boss. He had set up the meeting with his partner, Alan Vance, the most ruthless divorce attorney in New York. They called him the shark in a suit. He was exactly who I needed. The reception area smelled of expensive leather and intimidation. I sat straight, my hands folded over the clutch that contained the USB drive with the evidence I had stolen from the library the night before. When the assistant called my name, I walked into the corner office with my head held high. Alan Vance was a man who looked like he carved his opponents out of granite. He didn't smile when I entered. He gestured to the chair opposite his massive mahogany desk. James had briefed him, but I knew I had to sell the case. Lawyers like Vance didn't take cases they couldn't win. Mrs. Castillo Vance said, his voice deep and resonant. James tells me you are sitting on a powder keg. I usually handle separations of assets, not criminal takedowns. Why do you need me? I placed the USB drive on the desk. Because I don't just want a divorce, Mr. Vance. I want justice. My husband and his family aren't just cheating on me. They are planning to frame me for tax fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. They want to leave me destitute and in prison. I need someone who can stop a bullet and fire back a cannonball. Vance plugged the drive into his laptop. He spent the next 20 minutes in silence clicking through the files. I watched his face. At first, he was impassive. Then his eyebrows raised. He leaned in closer to the screen. He muttered something under his breath when he saw the double ledger photos. Finally, he looked up at me, and for the first time there was a glint of respect in his eyes. This is comprehensive, he said. You have everything here. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the invoices from the cartel front in Mexico. This isn't just a messy divorce, Emily. This is a RICO case. If we hand this to the Southern District of New York, the Castillo family won't be worrying about alimony. They will be worrying about surviving federal prison. That is the plan, I said coldly, but I need to protect myself first. They are planning to serve me with papers this Saturday. They are going to freeze my access to everything and accuse me of infidelity. Vance nodded, tapping a pen against the desk. We will file a preemptive countersuit. We will file it under seal tomorrow morning, but we won't serve them yet. We will let them throw their party. We will let them think they have the upper hand. And then when they are most vulnerable, we will drop the hammer. But Emily, there is something else here. Something James didn't mention. He turned the laptop screen toward me. It was a document I hadn't fully analyzed yet. It was a loan agreement from a private equity firm in Nevada. Look at the signature line, Vance said. I squinted at the screen. It was a loan for $5 million secured against the assets of a company called EC Holdings. And there at the bottom was my signature, Emily Castillo. But it wasn't my signature. The loop on the Y was wrong. The slant was too aggressive. It was a forgery. A good one, but definitely a forgery. I didn't sign this. I whispered, the blood draining from my face. I don't even know what EC Holdings is. Vance leaned back, steepling his fingers. I did a quick background check while you were parking. EC Holdings was incorporated 3 months ago. You are listed as the sole proprietor, and this $5 million loan, it was disbursed last week. Do you know where the money went? I shook my head, my throat tight. It went directly into the Castillo Imports account to cover the deficit from their ghost shipments, Vance explained grimly. Then it was immediately transferred out to the Cayman Trust. Emily, do you understand what this is? This isn't just theft. This is the nuclear weapon they were saving for you. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. They took out a fraudulent loan in your name. They stole the money. And when the private equity firm comes looking for their $5 million, they won't go to Liam. They won't go to Isabella. They will come for you. And when you can't pay, they will prosecute you for bank fraud. This document carries a minimum sentence of 30 years. 30 years. The room spun. I gripped the arms of the chair. They weren't just going to ruin my reputation. They were going to end my life. They were going to lock me away until I was an old woman while they lived off the money they stole in my name. The cruelty was so absolute, so calculated, it was almost breathtaking. This changes everything, Vance said, turning back to me. We are not just filing for divorce. We are filing for fraud, forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy. This document is the nail in their coffin, but it is also the most dangerous piece of evidence we have. If they know you found this, they might panic. They might try to hurt you physically to destroy the evidence. I looked at the forged signature again. That loop on the Y. I had seen it before. It was how Sophia wrote. My sister-in-law, the girl I had helped with her homework, the girl I had taken shopping. She had forged my name to send me to prison. Mr. Vance, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Low, dangerous. I am not afraid of them. They are the ones who should be afraid. What do we do? Vance sat down and pulled a fresh legal pad toward him. We draft the complaint today. We include the handwriting analysis proving the forgery. We trace the IP address used to incorporate EC Holdings. I bet my license it traces back to their house Wi-Fi. We bundle it all. And then we wait for Saturday. Saturday, I repeated. The anniversary. Exactly. Vance smiled, and it was a terrifying sight. You're going to go to that party. You're going to smile. You're going to let them make their speeches. You're going to let them serve you with their little divorce papers. And then right when they think the show is over, I'm going to walk in with the U.S. Marshals. We aren't just serving them with a lawsuit, Emily. We are handing this evidence to the FBI this afternoon. By Saturday, warrants will be issued. I felt a surge of adrenaline so strong my hands started to shake. I clenched them into fists. FBI. Marshals. Prison. It was fitting. I reached into my bag and pulled out my checkbook. The checkbook for my secret account. I wrote a retainer check for $50,000. It was a huge chunk of my savings, but it was an investment in my freedom. I slid the check across the desk. Do whatever it takes, Mr. Vance. I want them to lose everything. I want them to lose the house, the cars, the company. I want Isabella to die in a cell wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of Chanel. Vance picked up the check. Consider it done. Go home, Mrs. Castillo. Play the part for 3 more days. Let them believe they have won. It makes the fall so much more satisfying. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. As I descended 45 floors, I felt lighter than I had in years. The victim was dead. The survivor was tired. But the avenger... She was just waking up. I drove back to the Hamptons in the rain. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was lit up. I could see shadows moving in the dining room. They were probably toasting to their brilliance. They were probably laughing about the dumb American girl who was paying for her own farewell party. I walked inside, shaking off the rain. Liam was in the hallway holding a glass of scotch. He looked at me with that familiar mix of boredom and annoyance. "Where have you been?" he asked. "You have been gone all day." I smiled at him. a genuine, radiant smile. I was just picking up my dress for Saturday, Liam. I want to look my best. It is going to be a night we will never forget. He sneered. Don't try too hard, Em. It is just a party. Oh, I thought as I walked past him up the stairs. It is not just a party, Liam. It is a funeral, and I am the one bringing the shovel. I went to my room and hid the legal documents Vance had given me copies of the draft complaint inside the lining of my old winter coat in the back of the closet. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the calendar on the wall. 3 days. 3 days until the mask comes off. 3 days until the forged loan blows up in their faces. 3 days until I take back my life. I laid down and closed my eyes, visualizing the look on Sophia's face when the handcuffs clicked. I slept like a baby. The nightmare was almost over. The reckoning was about to begin. The sun set over the Hamptons, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and bruised orange, a fitting backdrop for the evening's execution. The estate had been transformed. I had spent the last 3 days orchestrating every detail, not as a loving wife, but as a stage director, preparing the final act of a tragedy. White marquees dotted the lawn, thousands of imported orchids cascaded from the archways, and a string quartet played soft, innocuous Mozart in the corner. The driveway was already a parking lot of Bentleys, Aston Martins, and Ferraris. The sharks had arrived smelling blood and money, unaware that they were about to witness a massacre. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom for the last time. On the bed behind me lay the dress Isabella had selected for me. It was a pale, dusty pink chiffon thing, shapeless and modest. It was a dress designed for a wallflower, for a woman who fades into the background, for a wife who is meant to be seen but never heard. It was the uniform of the submissive, barren woman she wanted me to be. I turned my back on it. Instead, I reached into the garment bag I had hidden in the back of the closet. The zipper hissed as I pulled it down, revealing a flash of crimson. I stepped into the gown I had bought in the city. It was a structured architectural piece in blood-red silk, tailored to perfection. It hugged my waist and flared slightly at the hips with a neckline that was daring without being vulgar. It was a power suit disguised as an evening gown. It was the color of passion, of danger, and of war. I applied my makeup with the precision of a surgeon. Sharp winged eyeliner, a contour that highlighted the cheekbones I usually hid behind soft waves, and finally a lipstick that matched the dress perfectly. I pulled my hair up into a sleek high chignon, exposing my neck and the diamond earrings I had bought with my own money, a final fuck you to their belief that I was destitute. I took a deep breath. My heart wasn't racing, my hands weren't shaking. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. The Emily who cried in the bathroom was gone. The Emily who begged for affection was dead. The woman in the mirror was the CEO of her own destiny, and she was about to fire the entire board of directors. I opened the bedroom door and walked to the top of the grand staircase. Below me, the foyer was buzzing with chatter. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I spotted them immediately. Isabella was holding court near the entrance, draped in gold lame, looking like a melted trophy. Beside her stood Liam. He looked handsome in his tuxedo. I had to admit that. It was the face I had fallen in love with, the face that had lied to me every single day for 3 years. And clinging to his arm was Elena. My breath hitched for a fraction of a second. The audacity was breathtaking. She was wearing a tight royal blue dress that showed off her figure. She wasn't showing yet, but the way she placed a protective hand over her stomach was a signal loud and clear to anyone in the know. Liam was leaning down, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle. To the outside world, she was the cousin from Madrid. To me, she was the replacement. I placed my hand on the cool marble banister. It was time. I began to descend. The sound of my heels on the marble was sharp and distinct, cutting through the low hum of conversation. Heads began to turn. First a few guests near the stairs, then the waiters, and finally the family. The silence spread outward like a ripple in a pond. The string quartet even faltered for a beat. Liam looked up. His jaw literally dropped. He had never seen me look like this. He was used to the soft, malleable Emily. He was staring at a stranger. Beside him, Elena's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing with instant, instinctive jealousy. But it was Isabella's reaction that I savored the most. Her eyes widened, scanning the red dress, the diamonds, the confident posture. Her face flushed with anger. I had defied her direct order. I had stepped out of my assigned role. I reached the bottom of the stairs and walked straight toward them. The crowd parted for me, murmurs of admiration following in my wake. Darling Liam stammered, recovering slightly. "You look different." I smiled, showing too many teeth. "It is a special night, Liam. I wanted to wear something that made a statement. Don't you think red suits me?" Isabella stepped forward, her smile tight and strained. "It is certainly," bawled Emily. "I thought we agreed on the pink chiffon. It was so much more appropriate for your temperament." I laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, Isabella, pink is for little girls." Tonight, I felt like a woman. Besides, I wanted to match the flowers. I gestured to the red roses that filled the vases, another detail I had changed at the last minute without telling her. Elena spoke up, her voice sickly sweet, her accent thick. "It is a beautiful dress, Emily. Very dramatic. In Spain, we wear red for bullfights." I turned my gaze to her. It was the first time I had looked her in the eye since I found out about the baby. I held her gaze until she shifted uncomfortably. "How fitting, Elena," I said smoothly. "Because sometimes the bull wins." I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes, but I turned away before she could analyze it. I circulated through the room, playing the perfect hostess. I accepted compliments from Liam's business partners, men who had likely helped him launder money. I smiled at their wives, women who had gossiped about my infertility behind my back. I shook hands, I laughed at bad jokes, and I kept my eye on the clock. 7:30. Time for the speeches. A waiter brought me a glass of champagne. I took a sip, letting the bubbles burn my throat. I watched as Isabella signaled to the band to stop playing. She walked onto the small stage that had been set up at the end of the ballroom. She tapped the microphone, the feedback screeching slightly, drawing everyone's attention. Liam and Elena stood near the front, beaming up at her. I stood near the back in the shadows of a large pillar, watching the predator preen before the kill. "Good evening, everyone." Isabella began, her voice projecting that cultured aristocratic tone she had perfected. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my son Liam and his marriage." There was a polite ripple of applause. 3 years, Isabella continued, her eyes scanning the room but pointedly avoiding me. 3 years is a long time in today's world. We all know that marriage requires patience. It requires tolerance. And my son Liam has shown the patience of a saint. A few people chuckled. I felt my stomach tighten. She was starting the narrative. Liam the saint enduring the burden of his wife. "We are so proud of what Liam has built," Isabella said. "He has taken Castillo imports to new heights. He has secured the future of this family. And he has done it all while carrying the heavy weight of personal challenges at home." She paused for effect, letting the audience fill in the blanks. Everyone knew the rumor. Poor Liam, married to the American girl who can't give him an heir. She continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "And to Emily, where is she?" "Oh, there she is, in the back." She pointed a manicured finger at me. All eyes turned. I didn't shrink. I raised my glass in a mock toast. "We thank Emily for her efforts," Isabella said, choosing her words like poisoned darts. "She has been a supportive companion in her own limited way. She has tried her best to fit into our world, and we must applaud her for trying, even when the cultural gap was simply too wide to bridge. It takes a special kind of simple, sweet optimism to keep trying when things are clearly not meant to be." The insult was brutal. She was calling me stupid in front of 200 people. She was calling me a charity case. But then she did exactly what I knew she would do. She got arrogant. She thought she was safe. She looked down at her friends in the front row, the same women I had heard on the recordings, and she switched to Spanish. She thought she was just sharing a private joke with her inner circle. She thought the Gringa in the back was just a smiling mannequin. She leaned into the mic, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial purr in Spanish. "Disfruta el vestido rojo, querida, porque mañana estarás en la calle sin un centavo. Hoy es el día de tu ruina. Enjoy the red dress, dear. Because tomorrow you will be on the street without a penny. Today is the day of your ruin." Her friends laughed. Liam smirked, squeezing Elena's hand. Sophia, standing by the stage, covered her mouth to hide a giggle. The room was filled with the murmur of people who didn't understand and the cruel laughter of those who did. I stood perfectly still. The Spanish words hung in the air, sharp and clear. "Hoy es el día de tu ruina." My blood ran cold, but not with fear, with anticipation. She had just handed me the gun. I finished my champagne in one swallow and set the glass down on a passing tray with a definitive clink. I adjusted the skirt of my red dress. I checked the small clutch in my hand to make sure the microphone I had bribed the sound guy to connect was turned on. Isabella was stepping down from the stage, basking in the applause, looking like the queen of the world. Liam was moving to take the mic, probably to deliver the final blow to announce the separation or some other lie. But he wouldn't get the chance. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked through the crowd, my red dress blazing like a trail of fire. I wasn't walking to the exit. I was walking to the stage. The crowd parted again, sensing the shift in energy. They looked from me to Isabella, confused. Why was the simple wife walking with such purpose? I reached the stairs of the stage just as Liam reached for the microphone stand. I was faster. I grabbed the mic from his hand before he could even register I was there. The feedback whined again, sharper this time. The room went dead silent. Liam looked at me annoyed. "Emily, what are you doing? Sit down." I ignored him. I looked out at the sea of faces. I looked at the investors. I looked at the bankers. I looked at the friends who had betrayed me. And finally, I looked at Isabella, whose smug smile was just starting to falter. I took a deep breath. It was time to speak, and I had a lot to say. The wooden floorboards of the stage felt solid beneath my heels, grounding me as I stepped into the blinding glare of the spotlight. For a moment, the world narrowed down to the hum of the microphone in my hand and the sea of faces staring up at me from the shadows. To my left, Liam lunged forward, his face a mask of panicked irritation. He reached for the microphone, his fingers brushing against my arm, whispering a harsh command through his clenched teeth. "Give me that, Emily. You are embarrassing yourself. Go sit down before you ruin everything." I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. Instead, I turned to him, moving with a fluid, deliberate grace that he had never seen in me before. I looked him dead in the eye, my expression calm and terrifyingly vacant of the love I used to hold for him. "Not tonight, Liam." I said, my voice low, but amplified perfectly by the sound system so that a hush fell over the front row. "Tonight is not about you. It is about us. It is about the truth." I sidestepped him, leaving him grasping at empty air, and walked to the center of the stage. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. The clinking of silverware stopped. The whispers died down. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. 200 of the East Coast's most influential people were watching me. Bankers, politicians, socialites. And standing frozen near the stairs, Isabella stared at me with eyes that were no longer smug, but wary. She sensed the shift. She smelled the danger like an animal sensing a storm before the first drop of rain falls. I gripped the microphone stand, with one hand feeling the cool metal. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the adrenaline sharpen my senses. I smiled. It was the warmest, most radiant smile I had ever faked. "Thank you all for coming." I began, my voice ringing out clear and steady. "It is truly an honor to stand here tonight, surrounded by so much history, so much loyalty." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the room, locking eyes with the women who had laughed at me, the men who had dismissed me. My mother-in-law, Isabella, has always taught me the importance of heritage. I continued, turning my body slightly to gesture toward her. She stands there in her gold dress, looking like royalty. She has always told me that to truly be a part of this family, I needed to understand its roots. She often lamented that I was just a simple American girl, too disconnected from the rich culture of her ancestors. She said I lacked the nuance to understand the Castillo soul. Isabella stiffened. Her hand went to her throat, clutching her diamond necklace. She didn't like where this was going, but she couldn't stop it without causing a scene. She was trapped by her own rules of etiquette. "Well, I have a confession to make," I said, dropping my voice to an intimate confessional tone. "I have been taking lessons. I wanted to surprise you, Isabella. I wanted to show you that I have been listening. In fact, I have been listening very, very closely. So tonight, instead of a boring speech about our anniversary, I would like to recite a poem." I saw relief wash over Liam's face. He thought I was just going to embarrass myself with broken Spanish, recite some nursery rhyme, and step down. He relaxed his posture, crossing his arms, preparing to smirk at my clumsiness. "It is a poem I learned right here in this house," I said. "In fact, it was composed by Isabella herself just last Tuesday at the dinner table. It is a very modern piece. It speaks of betrayal, of greed, of the absolute contempt one woman can hold for another. The air in the room changed. The relief on Liam's face vanished, replaced by confusion. Isabella took a half step back, her mouth opening slightly. I took a breath, and then I let the mask fall completely. I switched languages. But I didn't speak with the hesitant, flat accent of a learner. I spoke with the rapid-fire melodic and biting cadence of a native speaker, mimicking Isabella's Madrid accent to perfection. Mira a la gringa estúpida. Sigue sonriendo como una idiota mientras le robamos hasta el último centavo. The words cracked through the room like a whip. Isabella gasped a loud, audible sound that echoed in the silence. Her face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. Her glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor, but no one looked at the mess. They were staring at me. I smiled coldly and switched back to English. For those of you who don't speak Spanish, let me translate that beautiful opening line. It means, look at the stupid American. She keeps smiling like an idiot while we steal every last cent she has. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Liam looked like he had been punched in the gut. He took a step toward me, shouting, "Emily, stop this!" "She is drunk," cut the mic. But the sound engineer didn't cut the mic. I had paid him $5,000 cash an hour ago to make sure this microphone stayed live no matter what. I didn't stop. I raised my voice, drowning out Liam's protests. I turned to Liam, switching back to Spanish, my voice dripping with the same venom he had used on me. "No te preocupes, mamá. Ella es tan ingenua que firmó los documentos sin leerlos. Cree que es por impuestos, pero en realidad le estamos dejando toda la deuda." I let the Spanish hang there for a second, watching Liam's eyes bulge with terror. He knew exactly what I was quoting. He remembered saying those words. Translation. I said, my voice turning hard as steel. "Don't worry, Mom. She's so naive she signed the documents without reading them. She thinks it is for taxes, but actually we are leaving her with all the debt." The crowd was buzzing now. This wasn't just a scene. It was a public accusation of fraud. Phones were out. People were recording. This was the Hampton social event of the decade, and I was the star. I walked to the edge of the stage looking down at Elena, who was trembling in her blue dress. "And let's not forget the romantic verse," I said. "The part about love." I looked directly at Elena and spoke the words Liam had whispered to her in the car. "Ya casi termina, mi amor. En cuanto la echemos a la calle, tú y Mateo podrán mudarse a la casa grande. Esa mula estéril nunca sabrá que el niño es mío." Elena let out a sob. She tried to hide behind Liam, but there was nowhere to hide. Translation. I roared, my anger finally breaking through the calm facade. "It is almost over, my love. As soon as we kick her out onto the street, you and Mateo can move into the big house. That sterile mule will never know the child is mine." The room erupted. The word sterile mule hung in the air, ugly and brutal. The cruelty of it was undeniable. Even the most cynical business sharks in the room looked disgusted. Isabella was shaking her head, frantically mouthing, No, it's a lie." But she couldn't find her voice. But words are just words, aren't they? I asked, my voice suddenly calm again. "You might think I am making this up. You might think I am just a crazy, jealous wife. After all, that is the narrative they have prepared for you. They were going to tell you I was mentally unstable." I reached into the pocket of my red dress and pulled out a small remote control. "But I am a forensic accountant," I said. "And in my world, we don't just listen to stories. We look at the data." I pointed the remote at the massive projection screen behind me, the one that was supposed to be displaying a montage of our happy marriage. I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. But instead of wedding photos, a massive high-resolution image of a bank statement appeared. It was zoomed in, clear as day. "This is the Cayman Islands Trust Fund account of Isabella Castillo," I narrated, using the laser pointer to circle a line item. "And this is a transfer of $500,000. The date, last Friday. The source, a fraudulent loan taken out in my name forged by my sister-in-law, Sophia." I clicked the button again. A new image appeared. It was a copy of the loan document with the fake signature highlighted next to my real one. Sophia, who was standing near the bar, shrieked. It was a sound of pure guilt. She turned and tried to run toward the exit, but the crowd was too dense. She was trapped. I clicked again. the screen filled with screenshots of text messages. They were blown up to 10 feet tall. Everyone could read them, from Liam to Isabella. The Gringa suspects nothing. I hate touching her. I can't wait to be with Elena. From Isabella to Liam. Make sure you get her to pay for the party before you serve the papers. We need to save cash for the baby. The crowd was reading along, a collective gasp rising from the floor. The evidence was overwhelming. It was undeniable. It was up there in black and white, exposing their greed, their malice, and their absolute lack of morality. Liam scrambled onto the stage, his face purple with rage. "Turn it off!" he screamed, lunging for the laptop connected to the projector. "You crazy bitch!" "Turn it off." He reached the table, but before he could touch the computer, two large men in dark suits stepped out from behind the curtain. I had hired them for security, but not just any security. They were ex-military. They blocked Liam's path like a concrete wall. He bounced off them, stumbling back. "Don't touch the equipment, Liam," I said coolly. "It is evidence." I turned back to the crowd. The image on the screen changed one last time. It was a photo taken from a distance showing Liam and Elena on a beach in Miami. Liam's hand was resting on her stomach. They were laughing. And in the corner of the photo, holding a bag of cash, was a man known to federal authorities as a key figure in the Juarez cartel. James had found that photo for me this morning. It was the kill shot. You see, I said, my voice deadly serious now. They didn't just cheat on me. They didn't just steal from me. They used this company, this legacy that Isabella is so proud of, to wash money for criminals. And they planned to frame me for it. They planned to send me to prison for their crimes. I looked down at Isabella. She had collapsed into a chair, fanning herself, gasping for air. Her empire was crumbling in real time. Her friends were backing away from her as if she were contagious. The social status she valued more than life itself was incinerated. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at her. "You wanted a speech, Isabella," I said, switching back to Spanish for one final lethal sentence. "Querías humillarme en mi propio idioma, pero olvidaste que el idioma de la verdad es universal. You wanted to humiliate me in my own language, but you forgot that the language of truth is universal." I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage floor with a deafening thud that echoed through the silent ballroom. Liam was sobbing on the stage behind me. Elena was hysterical. Isabella looked like a corpse propped up in a golden dress. But I wasn't done. The show was over, but the law was just arriving. As the feedback from the dropped mic faded, a new sound cut through the air. Sirens, lots of them, growing louder and louder, coming up the long driveway. Blue and red lights began to flash through the sheer windows of the ballroom, painting the terrified faces of the Castillo family in strobes of police colors. I stood center stage in my red dress, watching the doors. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I waited. I had lit the match, and now I was going to watch them burn. Liam scrambled up the stairs of the stage, his face contorted into a mask of pure animalistic panic. He looked like a cornered rat, his eyes bulging, his teeth bared. He wasn't seeing his wife anymore. He was seeing the destruction of his entire world, and his only instinct was to silence the source. He reached for me, his hands clawing at the air, screaming something incoherently about tearing me apart. For a split second, the crowd gasped, expecting violence. They expected the frail, submissive Emily to cower. But I didn't move an inch. I didn't even blink. 2 feet before he could touch me, a wall of muscle materialized between us. My head of security, a former Marine named Marcus, who I had hired 3 days ago using the funds from my secret account, stepped out from the shadows. Marcus moved with the speed and precision of a machine. He didn't strike Liam, he simply intercepted him. He caught Liam by the lapels of his expensive tuxedo and shoved him backward. The force of the shove sent Liam stumbling, his heels catching on the stage wiring. He fell hard onto his backside, looking up at Marcus in shock. "Stay down, Mr. Castillo," Marcus said, his voice deep and rumbling like thunder. "Or I will put you down." Liam froze. He looked at Marcus, then at me. The realization hit him. I wasn't unprotected. I wasn't alone. I had built a fortress around myself while he was busy picking out baby names with his mistress. I looked down at my husband, sprawling on the floor like a pouting child. The projector screen behind me was still casting the damning evidence of his infidelity and fraud across his face, illuminating his shame in high definition. "You can't hurt me anymore, Liam," I said into the microphone, my voice calm but echoing with finality. "The time for bullying is over." I turned my attention back to the crowd. They were paralyzed, caught between the horror of the revelation and the thrill of the drama. But I wasn't done. I had one final card to play. The ace in the hole. I looked directly at Isabella. She was still sitting in her chair, clutching her chest, her face a portrait of denial. She was looking around the room, trying to make eye contact with her powerful friends, silently begging them to intervene, to tell her this was just a bad dream. But no one looked back. They were all looking at the doors. I raised the microphone one last time. "Isabella," I said, my voice softening deceptively. "You always told me that a good hostess provides gifts for her guests. You said that generosity is the mark of true aristocracy. Well, I have taken that lesson to heart. I have one final gift for you, a special surprise to commemorate this unforgettable evening." I pointed toward the double mahogany doors at the back of the ballroom. "I would like to introduce you to your new friend's mother. I think you will be spending a lot of time with them." On cue, the doors burst open. It wasn't the caterers. It wasn't a surprise band. It was a phalanx of federal agents. The room erupted in chaos. Men and women in dark windbreakers emblazoned with the yellow letters FBI and IRS poured into the ballroom. They moved with a synchronized efficiency that cut through the socialite pretenses of the evening like a knife. The flashing red and blue lights from the cruisers outside bathed the room in a strobe of emergency colors reflecting off the crystal chandeliers and the terrified faces of the guests. Leading the charge was a man in a sharp gray suit, walking with the confident stride of a predator who has cornered his prey. James Sterling, my old boss, my mentor, the man who had taught me everything I knew about following the money. He locked eyes with me from across the room and gave a single imperceptible nod. It was a salute, acknowledgement from one professional to another. We had done it. The trap had snapped shut. James gestured to the agents pointing directly at the stage and the front row. "Secure the exits." He barked, his voice commanding authority over the din of the crowd. "No one leaves until they are processed." The agents fanned out. Two of them marched straight for the stage. They hauled Liam up from the floor. He tried to pull away, shouting, "Do you know who I am? My family owns this town. You have the right to remain silent." The agent replied, spinning Liam around and slamming him against the speaker stack. The metallic click of handcuffs fastening around his wrists was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Another team of agents swarmed Sophia near the bar. She screamed a high-pitched, piercing sound as they grabbed her arms. She tried to kick them, her heels slipping on the polished floor. "You can't touch me, I didn't do anything. It was a mistake. We have the loan documents, Miss Castillo," an agent said, calmly tightening the cuffs. "Conspiracy to commit bank fraud and identity theft. You will have plenty of time to explain your mistake to a federal judge." But the main event was happening in the front row. James Sterling walked personally to Isabella. She was standing now, trembling violently, her gold dress shimmering as she shook. She looked small, frail. The towering matriarch had shrunk into a frightened old woman. "Isabella Castillo," James said, holding up a warrant. "You are under arrest for tax evasion, money laundering, and racketeering." Isabella stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "This is preposterous!" she shrieked, her accent thickening in her panic. "Who are you? Get out of my house. I will call the senator. I will call the governor." "The governor signed the warrant," James said coldly, "and he sends his regards." He signaled to two female agents who stepped forward and grabbed Isabella's arms. When they touched her, something in Isabella snapped. The veneer of civilization, the layers of etiquette and high society breeding instantly evaporated. She reverted to pure feral rage. She began to scream, not in the polite, controlled English she used for her friends, but in rapid guttural Spanish. She thrashed against the agents, spitting and cursing. Maldita seas, gringa del infierno. Eres una víbora. Te di un hogar y así me pagas." Damn you, gringa from hell. You're a viper. I gave you a home, and this is how you repay me." Her voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, ugly and raw. The guests recoiled in horror. This was the true Isabella. The woman who hid behind pearls and charity galas was gone, replaced by a vicious cornered animal. She turned her head, locking her wild eyes on me. I was still standing on the stage, looking down at her from my position of power. The red dress flowed around me like armor. "Me las pagarás!" she screamed, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth. "Te mataré, te destruiré. You will pay for this. I will kill you. I will destroy you." Ew. The agents began to drag her toward the exit. She dug her heels into the carpet, fighting every inch of the way, leaving skid marks on the expensive flooring she loved so much. I watched her struggle. I watched the woman who had tormented me for 3 years. The woman who had made me feel small, ugly, and worthless now being hauled away like common trash. I could have stayed silent. I could have let the image of her arrest be the final memory. But I needed her to hear me one last time. I needed to close the book in the language she had used to exclude me. I raised the microphone to my lips. "Stop," I commanded. The authority in my voice was so absolute that for a second even the agents paused. Isabella stopped thrashing, panting heavily, looking up at me with hatred burning in her eyes. The room fell silent save for the crackle of police radios. I walked to the very edge of the stage. I looked down at her not with anger, but with a cold, detached pity. I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. "Isabella," I said softly into the microphone, "you were right about one thing. Family is everything." I gestured to James, to the agents, to the truth that was now laid bare. "But you never understood what family meant. You thought it was about blood and money, but family is about trust, and you broke that trust the moment you thought you could outsmart me." I took a deep breath, savoring the air. It tasted like freedom. I leaned in closer, speaking directly to her, my voice dropping to a whisper that was amplified to boom across the room. "Espero que te guste tu nueva celda, Isabela. Dicen que el naranja es el nuevo dorado. I hope you like your new cell, Isabella. They say orange is the new gold." Isabella's eyes widened in shock. And then I delivered the final blow, the words I had been saving since that first dinner. "Adios, suegra. Goodbye, mother-in-law." I signaled to the agents. "Take her away." Isabella let out one final incoherent wail of despair as they dragged her through the double doors and out into the flashing lights of the police cruisers. Liam followed her weeping openly, his head hanging low. Sophia was led out behind them, still screaming about her innocence. Elena, the cousin, was left standing alone near the stage, clutching her stomach, looking around wildly. She realized perhaps for the first time that the golden ticket she thought she had won was actually a one-way ticket to poverty. Without Liam's money, without the Castillo protection, she was nothing. I didn't even bother to address her. Her punishment would be living the life she had tried to steal, but without the prize. The doors closed behind the Castillo family. They were gone. I stood alone on the stage. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't awkward. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. James Sterling walked up to the stage and offered me a hand. I took it, and he helped me down. "You okay?" he asked quietly, ignoring the hundreds of eyes still watching us. I looked at the empty doorway. I looked at the red dress reflected in the glass. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't realized was crushing me until it was gone. I smiled. A real smile this time. "I am better than okay, James. I am finished." I handed him the microphone. I turned my back on the stunned crowd, on the whispered gossip, on the ruins of the life I had burned to the ground. I walked toward the side exit, my head held high, my heels clicking a steady rhythm of victory on the marble floor. I didn't look back. There was nothing left behind me but ashes. And from ashes I knew was the only place to rise. The headlines the next morning were brutal. They were splashed across every major newspaper and running on a continuous loop on the cable news channels. The Hamptons Gatsby Falls. The wine laundromat. But my favorite headline, the one I clipped and kept in a scrapbook, simply read, "The wife who knew too much." For the first time in 3 years, I woke up in the master bedroom without the suffocating weight of anxiety pressing down on my chest. The house was quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of a home, but the hollow echoing silence of a crime scene that had been picked clean. The FBI had finished their initial sweep at dawn, hauling away boxes of documents, computers, and the contents of the safe I had cracked. They had taken everything. I walked downstairs, my bare feet cold on the marble floors. The staff had fled the moment the handcuffs came out, terrified of being implicated. I was alone in a mansion that felt like a mausoleum to greed. I made myself a cup of coffee, the cheap instant kind I used to drink before I married into this nightmare, and sat on the terrace overlooking the ocean. I watched the waves crash against the shore, rhythmic and relentless, washing away the debris of the night before. The legal proceedings moved with a speed that shocked everyone, driven by the mountain of irrefutable evidence I had provided. Because I had handed James Sterling the black ledger, the recordings and the digital footprint of the money laundering operation on a silver platter, there was no wiggle room. There were no plea deals to be made because they had nothing to trade. I had already given the prosecutors everything. The asset freeze was absolute. Within an hour of the arrest, every bank account linked to the Castillo name was locked. The Cayman Trust, the shell companies, the personal checking accounts, even the secret stash Liam thought he had hidden in cryptocurrency. It was all frozen. This was the catalyst that revealed the true nature of Elena, the grieving pregnant mistress. I learned the details from James later. Apparently, Elena had not been arrested at the party. She was merely detained, questioned, and released because her name wasn't on any of the official documents yet. She had returned to the penthouse Liam had bought for her, the one paid for with stolen funds, intending to grab her jewelry and cash before fleeing to Spain. But she had underestimated the efficiency of the federal government. When she arrived at the penthouse, the locks had already been changed. A seizure notice was pasted to the door. Witnesses said she went into a frenzy. She tried to use the credit card Liam had given her to check into the Four Seasons. Declined. She tried the backup card. Declined. She tried to withdraw cash from an ATM. Insufficient funds. The love of Liam's life, the woman he was willing to destroy me for, didn't even wait for his arraignment. She didn't hire him a lawyer. She didn't visit him in the holding cell. When she realized the golden goose was dead, she didn't mourn. She packed a bag. The last trace of Elena was a security camera image of her boarding a budget flight to Madrid using a ticket paid for by her father. She left Liam to rot without a backward glance. The baby the heir Liam had sacrificed everything for would grow up on another continent, likely told that his father was dead. In a way, he was. The trial, or rather the sentencing hearing, took place 3 months later. I attended every single day. I didn't sit in the back. I sat in the front row directly behind the prosecutor, wearing a different tailored suit every day. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to know that I wasn't hiding. Isabella and Liam were brought in wearing standard-issue prison jumpsuits. The visual transformation was staggering. Isabella, stripped of her Botox, her hair dye, and her designer clothes, looked 20 years older. She looked frail and grey. Liam looked like a ghost. He had lost weight, his eyes were sunken, and he had a nervous tick in his jaw that jumped every time the judge spoke. When they saw me, Liam started to cry. He mouthed the word, "sorry." I simply looked at him, my face a mask of indifference. It was too late for apologies. The time for sorry was before he plotted to frame me for a felony. The evidence against them was damning. The prosecutor played the recordings in open court. The jury listened to Isabella calling me a stupid American. They listened to Liam laughing about my infertility. They listened to them plotting to defraud the US government of millions of dollars. But the nail in the coffin was the handwriting analysis of the forged loan document. My lawyer, Alan Vance, had done his job perfectly. He proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Sophia had forged my signature at Isabella's instruction. Sophia, who had taken a plea deal to testify against her mother and brother in exchange for a reduced sentence of 2 years, wept on the stand as she confirmed everything. She admitted they called me the Gringa because they thought I was too simple to understand their sophisticated crimes. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for white-collar arrogance, delivered the sentence with a hammer blow that echoed through the courtroom. Isabella Castillo for the crimes of money laundering, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison. Liam Castillo, for your role in these crimes and for the despicable act of identity theft against your spouse, I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison. 10 years. A decade. They would miss the prime of their lives. Isabella would likely die in prison or come out a destitute old woman. Liam would emerge in his 40s, a felon with no skills and no name. As the bailiffs led them away, Isabella stopped. She turned to look at me. There was no fire left in her eyes, only a deep, bottomless despair. She didn't curse me this time. She didn't speak Spanish. She just looked at the woman she had underestimated, and then she lowered her head in defeat. I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. The press was waiting. Flashes went off, reporters shouted questions, but I didn't stop. I walked straight to the black town car where Alan Vance was waiting. "We have good news," Alan said, as I slid into the leather seat. I looked at him. "Better than 10 years. Much better," he smiled, opening a leather folder. The government seizure of the Castillo assets was total. The winery, the inventory, the mansion, the cars, the offshore accounts. It was all being confiscated to pay back the back taxes and the penalties. Usually, in cases like this, the spouse is left with nothing collateral damage in the war against fraud. But I wasn't just a spouse. I was a whistleblower. And more importantly, I was a victim of identity theft. Under the federal victim restitution laws, and thanks to the brilliant maneuvering of my legal team, the court had ruled that the $5 million loan taken out in my name was a fraudulent debt. I was absolved of any liability. The bank that had issued the loan without proper due diligence had to eat the loss. But here was the twist that made justice taste so sweet. Before the government seized the remaining legitimate assets, the money that had actually been made legally through the initial wine business before they started laundering, the judge ordered that the marital assets be divided. Since I was the innocent party and the victim of a conspiracy to defraud the court, awarded me 50% of the liquid assets prior to the government fines being levied against Liam's share. Basically, the government took Liam's half to pay his debts. My half was untouchable. Alan handed me a cashier's check. I looked at the number. It was staggering. It wasn't just the money I had saved. It was half the value of the house before it was seized. It was half the value of the legitimate investments. It was millions of dollars. "This is yours," Alan said. "Clean, legal, tax-free settlement." I held the check in my hands. It wasn't just paper. It was my refund. It was a refund for 3 years of emotional abuse, a refund for the career I had sacrificed, a refund for every time they called me stupid in a language they thought I couldn't speak. I looked out the window as we drove through the city. I thought about Liam sitting in his cell, realizing that the gringa he tried to rob had walked away with the only clean money the family had left. I thought about Elena stranded in Madrid, looking for her next victim. I thought about Isabella wearing orange just as I had predicted. I took out my phone and dialed a number. "Hello?" A voice answered. It was my old real estate agent in New York. "Hi, Sarah," I said. "It is Emily. I'm looking for an apartment." "Oh, Emily, I heard you were going through some things? Looking for something small?" "No," I said, looking at the check again. "I'm looking for something with a view." And Sarah, "Yes, make sure it has a really good security system and a guest room. I have a feeling I'm going to be starting a whole new life, and I want plenty of room for it." I hung up the phone and leaned back in the seat. The nightmare was over. The Castillo empire had crumbled into dust, blown away by the wind of their own hubris. And I was still standing. I wasn't the stupid American. I wasn't the barren mule. I wasn't the victim. I was Emily, and I was just getting started. 6 months is a strange amount of time. It is long enough for the seasons to change, for leaves to turn from green to gold and then to brown, but short enough that the memories of a former life can still catch you off guard, like a sudden draft in a warm room. I sat at a small round table outside a cafe in the Marais district of Paris, watching the autumn sunlight filter through the plane trees. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts and strong espresso, a stark contrast to the sterile lilies and bleach scent of the Castillo mansion. I took a sip of my café au lait and adjusted my sunglasses. On the laptop open before me, a complex spreadsheet was blinking with live data from the Tokyo Stock Exchange. I wasn't just Emily the housewife anymore. I wasn't even just Emily the forensic accountant. I had reinvented myself. Using the settlement money and my renewed reputation, I had started a boutique consultancy firm specializing in asset recovery for high net worth divorce cases. I was the woman other women called when they suspected their husbands were hiding money. I was the ghost in the machine, the hunter who knew exactly where the bodies were buried because I had dug a grave myself. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a text from a controlling husband asking where I was. It was a notification from my bank. A retainer fee had just cleared from a client in London. £50,000. I smiled. It felt good to earn money that I didn't have to hide money, that was a direct result of my own intellect and relentless drive. The waiter, a young man with a kind smile, approached my table. He held a small stack of mail that had been forwarded to my flat, and then brought here as was my routine. Madame for you, he said, placing the envelopes on the marble table. Thank you, Pierre, I replied in fluent French, a language I had picked up with the same ease I had mastered Spanish. I sifted through the envelopes. A bill for the internet, an invitation to a gallery opening, and then at the bottom of the stack, a plain white envelope with a familiar, terrifying return address. Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I felt a strange, cold curiosity, like looking at a specimen in a jar. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Liam's, but it was shaky, scrawled lacking the arrogant flourish it used to have. I picked up the envelope. It felt light, flimsy. Inside I knew were pages of excuses. He was likely begging for forgiveness. He was probably telling me that he had found God, or that he realized he always loved me, or that Elena meant nothing. He was probably asking for money for the commissary, or asking me to speak to his lawyer about an appeal. I held the letter up to the sunlight. I could see the shadow of the folded paper inside. For a moment I thought about opening it. I thought about reading his words, drinking in his misery like a fine wine. It would be satisfying, wouldn't it, to hear him grovel, to read about how much he missed the soft life I had provided for him. But then I looked around at the bustling street. I looked at the young couple kissing on the corner. I looked at the old man reading a newspaper on the bench. I looked at my own reflection in the darkened screen of my laptop. The woman in the reflection didn't need Liam's apology. She didn't need his validation. Reading his words would be inviting him back into my head even for a second. It would be giving him a voice in a life where he no longer deserved to whisper. I reached into my purse and pulled out a silver lighter. I didn't open the envelope. I simply flicked the wheel of the lighter. The flame jumped up orange and blue, dancing in the Parisian breeze. I held the corner of the envelope to the fire. The paper caught instantly. The flame curled the edges, turning the white to black, consuming the ink, the stamps, and the lies inside. I held it until the heat licked at my fingertips, watching the words turn to ash before they could ever be read. I dropped the burning remnant into the heavy ceramic ashtray on the table and watched it crumble into grey dust. I felt lighter. It was as if the last invisible tether connecting me to that house in the Hamptons had just snapped. Forgiveness isn't for you, Liam, I whispered to the pile of ash, and neither is my attention. I blew the ash away, watching it scatter into the wind, disappearing into the gutters of Paris. Excuse me? A deep voice interrupted my thoughts. I looked up. Standing there was a man I had been expecting, but whose presence still managed to take my breath away. Gabriel. He was tall with salt and pepper hair and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo or a flashy watch. He was wearing a worn leather jacket and a scarf, carrying a stack of books under one arm. Gabriel was a professor of macroeconomics at the Sorbonne. We had met 2 months ago at a lecture on global financial fraud, where I was a guest speaker. He didn't look at my legs. He didn't look at my chest. He looked directly into my eyes. I hope I'm not interrupting a ritual, he said, glancing at the ashtray. I smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached all the way to my soul. Just taking out the trash, Gabriel. Please sit. He pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down. He placed the books on the table. One of them was a copy of the case study I had written on the Castillo Ponzi scheme, which had been published in a financial journal last week. I read your draft, he said, tapping the cover. Emily, your analysis of the shell company structures is brilliant. The way you trace the liquidity flow through the offshore trusts. It is poetry. I have never seen anyone deconstruct a fraud with such elegance. I felt a flush of pride on my cheeks. It wasn't flattery. It was professional respect. He saw my mind. He saw the hours of work, the logic, the strategy. He didn't see a trophy wife. He saw an intellectual equal. Thank you, I said. It was a messy case, but the numbers always tell the truth, eventually. Gabriel leaned forward, his expression serious. You know the university is looking for a guest lecturer for the spring semester. I showed the dean your paper. He wants to meet you. He thinks you could teach the advanced forensic accounting module. Me? Teach? Why not? Gabriel asked, reaching across the table to cover my hand with his. His hand was warm and rough. You are the best in the field, Emily. You have lived it. You have survived it. You have a lot to teach the next generation about how to protect themselves. I looked at our hands. For 3 years, Liam's touch had made me feel small. It had been a cage. Gabriel's touch felt like an anchor. It was steady. It was supportive. It didn't ask for anything. It simply offered presence. I would love that, I said softly. Gabriel smiled. Good. But first lunch. I found a little place that serves the best coq au vin in the city, and I promise I won't make you cook it. I laughed. It was a loud, happy sound that turned a few heads. I closed my laptop. The stock market could wait. The emails could wait. The past was ash in an ashtray, and the man sitting across from me was looking at me as if I were the most fascinating equation he had ever tried to solve. I stood up, grabbing my purse and my coat. I took Gabriel's arm, and we walked out onto the cobblestone street, merging into the rhythm of the city. I was 30 years old. I was divorced. I was a survivor. But as I walked down the street in Paris, holding the arm of a man who loved my brain more than my body, I realized something else. I was free. And for the first time in my life, the story I was writing was entirely my own. Looking back at the woman I was 3 years ago, the one who cried in the bathroom while they mocked her, I want to give her a hug. I want to tell her that her kindness was never a weakness. It was a weapon she just hadn't learned to use yet. The Castillo family made a fatal mistake. They confused silence with ignorance. They looked at a quiet woman and saw a blank page, never realizing that I was writing down every single thing they said. They thought their secret language was a fortress, a high wall that kept me out and kept their scene safe. But walls have ears, and fortresses crumble when the foundation is rotten. There is a profound lesson here for anyone who has ever been underestimated, marginalized, or treated like they didn't belong. Never let anyone convince you that you are powerless just because you are quiet. Silence is not surrender. Silence is observation. Silence is gathering your strength. Silence is waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Isabella and Liam thought they were playing chess with a pawn, but they didn't realize until it was too late that the pawn had crossed the board and become a queen. They relied on their heritage, their money, and their language to bully me, but they forgot the most important rule of engagement. The most powerful language in the world isn't English. It isn't Spanish. It isn't the language of law or the language of finance. The most powerful language is the truth. It cuts through every lie, every accent, and every barrier. It is universal, and when you speak it, the whole world listens. No amount of money or influence can silence the truth once it is spoken out loud. I walked away from that life with my head held high, my bank account full, and my integrity intact. I hope my story reminds you that even when you feel surrounded by enemies, you are stronger than you think. You have the power to flip the script. You have the power to be the hero of your own life. Now I want to hear from you. If you felt a rush of absolute satisfaction when I finally revealed that I understood every word of their insults, if you cheered when I told Isabella goodbye in her own language, please hit that like button right now. Let us show the world that justice is always served. And I have a question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where people were talking about you in another language, thinking you couldn't understand? Did you reveal yourself immediately, or did you keep the secret like I did to gather information? Tell me your story in the comments below. I want to know how you handled it. I will be sitting down with a glass of wine, reading your comments at 8 p.m. tonight, so make sure you share your experience. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and revenge. Until next time, remember to keep your eyes open, your ears listening, and never be afraid to speak your truth.